Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Riz Talks. I'm your host Riz. Remember our motto is to think again about our views, look at real history and understand how humanity took some wrong turns. Today we explore how the world would have been if there was peace in Palestine. Based on historical analysis, exploring an alternative history where Palestine was not colonized in the last century reveals a present day reality fundamentally different from our own. It is the reality that a non colonized Palestine would have likely emerged as a sovereign independent state by the mid 20th century, altering the geopolitical landscape of West Asia, i.e., the Middle East, by preventing the core conflict that has fueled regional instability for generations. This hypothesis is grounded in an examination of the actual impacts of colonialism in the region, why the world allowed the apartheid state and genocides here, same as in Bosnia, Rwanda, Sudan, and many other places, is the reason why we are at this juncture of seeing it being repeated again and again. The United Nations 1948 Genocide Convention defines genocide as acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. US laws are in conformity here. Genocide isn't just mass killing, it includes tactics like starvation, forced removal, and cultural destruction. So, sanctions can be one form. If we can afford war budgets, why can't we afford to save the victims? And why does the world seem okay with the idea of the last colony, Israel? Of course, the persecution of Jewish people over millennia is one of the most complex and enduring phenomena in human history. It is not the result of a single cause, but a confluence of religious, social, economic, and political factors that have evolved over time, often reinforcing each other. Starts early Christian theology, where they held Jews collectively responsible for the death of Jesus Christ. Jewish communities maintained separateness in religious laws, dietary practices, and so on, setting them apart from the Christian or Muslim majorities. So they were singled out in the history and past. As Jews were forbidden from owning land in medieval Christian Europe, many turned to lending money on interest, which was banned in Islam and early Christianity. Resentment from debtors allowed rulers to exploit them as tax collectors, further fueling popular anger. Jews were often blamed for poisoning wells, ritually murdering Christian children, the blood libel, as it was called, or secretly plotting to control the world, even for natural disasters like the Black Death. The Christian Europe Middle Ages established the core themes of European anti Semitism. Clergy like John Chrysostom preached vehemently against Jews, cementing the deicide charge, which is the killing of Christ, killing of God. Crusaders on the way to liberate the Holy Land from Muslims often turned on Jewish communities first, slaughtering them as the infidels in our midst. England, 1290. Jews were expelled after being bled dry by royal taxes. Spain, 1492. After the Alhambra decree, following the Reconquista, giving Jews a choice, convert to Christianity or be expelled. This ended a golden age of Jewish culture in Muslim Spain. Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales includes the Prioress's Tales, a classic example of the blood libel trope, showing how deeply these myths were embedded in culture at the time. Shakespeare's Shylock character wanted a pound of flesh. Rome in 1505, also known as the early modern period, Pope Paul IV established the first Jewish ghetto, forcing Jews into segregated walled quarters. And you can see those models still existing today, although not segregated as such, but those quarters still remain. Poland, Lithuania Cossack uprising in 1648, Jews were massacred in tens of thousands. The 19th century anti Semitism hatred was based on a new pseudo scientific theory of race. As in the Dreyfus Affair in France, 1894, Captain Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish officer, was falsely convicted of treason based on anti Semitic sentiment. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, 1903, was another text published in Russia that claimed to reveal a Jewish conspiracy for global domination. These initiated pogroms in the Russian Empire, state-sponsored mob violence against Jewish communities. Nazi Germany's ideology was built on the concept of Jews as a parasitic race, poisoning the purity of the German Volk. They began with legal discrimination. Nuremberg laws, 1935, escalated to organized violence. Kristallnacht, 1938, and culminated in the systematic industrial-scale genocide of the final solution, murdering millions of Jews, is what we know as the Holocaust. Anti-Semitism did not disappear after World War II. It mutated into new forms. Stalin's Soviet Union pursued anti-Semitic policies, branding Jews as ruthless cosmopolitans and disloyal. White supremacist groups continue to promote ancient Jewish conspiracy theories. So now, all this led Theodor Herzl to conclude that even in an enlightened, assimilated nation like France, Jews were not safe, leading him to founding of the political Zionism. The political Zionism means a Jewish state based on their religious books. During the First World War, British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour on November 2, 1970, sent a formal declaration letter to a banker, Lord Walter Rothschild, a banker, a prominent leader of the British Jewish community and Zionist movement. That was the start. The idea took off in the late 19th century, partly because Jews faced rampant anti-Semitism across Europe. So it was a European problem that was turned into a problem for West Asia, Middle East. Rothschild and others led and funded the mass migration of Jews to Palestine, buying the lands from Palestinians, funding militants for eliminating any hurdles for creating a Jewish state. This was the start of the Jewish New Zionist history. 3 Jewish groups, factions, were working to create a country out of the Palestinian land based on their Zionist theory. And some of it was not legal, what they were doing. They started on the people who had given them refuge, the Palestinians. Muslims treated Jews fairly in history, from Spain to Iran to Morocco, in the midst. These 3 Jewish factions, working in political, militant, espionage arenas, declared Israel a nation in 1948 under Ben Gurion, leader of one of the factions. They all merged and formed, which is still today Mossad, Israel Defense Force, and the political establishment, the political parties there. US recognized it as an opportunity to sell weapons to everybody in the region. Palestinians were allowed Jewish refugees and helping them to settle, not realizing that they would take over from them their lands, their farms, and had been planning it since 1917. It was not that they got up and declared a country in 1948 without any preparation. There was a rebellion against the British by the Arabs. The British had a mandate and were supporting the Jews, but that rebellion by the Arabs failed. Jewish underground organizations, Irgun, one of the 3 major organizations, was held responsible for a lot of terrorist activities, including the bombing of King David Hotel, where the British administrative headquarters were for the mandatory Palestine. They declared Israel as a country. And then started the merciless massacre of Palestinian people who had given them sanctuary, making 750,000 of them refugees with no right to return. Most Israelis used to see Zionism as a call for inclusivity and innovation, but now lean towards expansionism, leading to the Gaza genocide, illegal settlements in the West Bank, taking over of Jerusalem, taking over lands from Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, besides the Palestinians themselves. Even within Israel, people argue over what Zionism means today. Is it about survival or dominance? Zionism's survival depends on how the world views it. Can it survive? Probably, but not without change. Its future depends on addressing key challenges, achieving peace with Palestinians, managing its identity as both a Jewish and a democratic state, and navigating global scrutiny. It's about people, which can adapt to prioritize coexistence over conflict. Many American Jews are highly critical of the current Israeli government and its policies in the West Bank and Gaza. The recent bombing and massacre of civilians, including helpless babies in hospitals and tents, has exposed the inhumanity and war crimes. The world not doing anything about the killing of journalists, medics, and human rights activists, besides killing for fun and demolishing cities, is a dark chapter in our history. The single factor keeping Israel posture is support from the United States. The idea of a secret Jewish cabal controlling governments is now supported by Epstein and similar scenarios. APEC, the pro-Israel lobby, is a very influential group in Washington. They get nearly 20 billion from the US Congress every year and funnel some of it back to support the congressmen who vote and support Israel. The colonization of Palestine was not an inevitable outcome, but a result of specific historical decisions and policies. The pivotal moment was obviously the Balfour Declaration of 1917, in which a colonial power, Britain, publicly pledged support for the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, while dismissively referring to the existing Palestinian Arab majority as the non-Jewish communities. The natural trajectory would have been towards the development of a sovereign Palestinian state. The Palestinian identity would have formed the basis for an independent state following World War II, much like its neighbors Jordan, Lebanon, Syria. In this alternate reality, where it had not been colonized, Palestine would be predominantly Arab with a significant Jewish minority that had grown organically over centuries, rather than through mass migration under colonial framework, resulting in murder and genocide. The political system would reflect the region's diversity, potentially evolving into a constitutional monarchy or a parliamentary republic. As a multi ethnic, multi religious society, its laws and identity would be built on a foundation of civic nationalism, striving to balance Arab, Islamic, and Jewish heritages. This stands in stark contrast to the current reality, where the fragmentation of the Palestinian people and the denial of their self determination, according to United Nations and international law, are central features of the conflict. Most significantly, the central trauma of the modern Palestinian experience, the Nakba and the Gaza, would not have occurred. The displacement of almost millions of Palestinians, the persecution, starvation, incarceration, lack of dignity, and human rights leading to recent events could all have been avoided. The existence of a stable, sovereign Palestine would have fundamentally been good. The numerous wars, the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories, and the ongoing cycles of violence between Israeli forces and groups like Hamas would be absent from history. This single change would have dramatically reduced a primary source of regional tension and military expenditure. The constant risk of the conflict escalating into a wider regional war would be virtually eliminated. The conflicts in Lebanon, the tensions with Syria, the war with Iran, and the animosities with Egypt have all been profoundly shaped by the Palestinian question. Freedom fighters like Hamas and Hezbollah, which draw much of their ideological and logical strength from resisting Israeli occupation, would not exist. The colonization of Palestine in the 20th century was a mistake and should be remedied as soon as possible to achieve regional peace and stability, for humanity, and for a good world order. While this exploration is necessarily hypothetical, it is grounded in the factual analysis of colonialism's destructive legacy and the persistent denial of Palestinian self-determination. It underscores that the current reality is not the only possible one, and that the pursuit of a just political solution, perhaps through decolonization, and a confederal model that guarantees equal rights, remains the only path to a lasting peace. Are humans the ultimate killers for fun? We hunt, fish, and engage in war, not always for survival. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Risk Talks. Are we living as humans without humanity in a way that will leave this world worse than we found it? So please share the message with others. Think again, challenge ideas, join the conversation, and subscribe. This is Risk Talks. Be curious, be kind, and come back for more.